a full professor in sociology, and I previously ran the applied digital sociology master's program here in our department. And in the last couple of years, since I stepped away from the director of the master's program, I've focused more on work that I've been doing for probably a decade or more now on public sociology. So what I'm going to do is just sort of as a way of introduction to this session on podcasting, I'm going to talk broadly about sort of the context in which we find ourselves to have this discussion about podcasting in the classroom, and then talk about sort of the digital and how it's reshaping our lives and the work that we do, and sort of where podcasting fits into that. So we just sort of have a handle on where we are and where we sit. So in terms of public scholarship, there was a time in the 20th century when it was kind of unusual for academics, traditionally trained academics, to have sort of public-facing careers. We talked at the time about, scholars existing in kind of an ivory tower. If that metaphor ever held true, it was perhaps more true in the 20th century than it has been in the 21st century. And part of what has reshaped that has been the digital, and I'll talk about how the digital has reshaped our lives in a second. But first, I just want to share some context about my own work. Most people probably know that my work is focused on the far right and white supremacy, but I also have this other set of work that I've done, I think of as sort of my secondary academic work that's really focused on public scholarship. So about 10 years ago, I think it was 2014, 15 in there, I had a large grant from the Ford Foundation called Just Publics at 365, which was based at the Graduate Center. And the whole focus of that project was to try and convince academics that we should share our work more publicly. And based on that work, on that big grant, which involved a lot of different people and lots of different activities, including podcasting, but also blogging and social media and all kinds of different things. And we also did a large, what do we call those? A large MOOC, right? Massive online open course that we ran out of the East Harlem campus at Silberman, and involved the community in that. So it was a really innovative project that I'm still really proud of, and many elements of it have gone into the ongoing life of CUNY and the Graduate Center in various ways. For me, part of what came out of that project were a couple of books that I did with co-authors. One with Polly Thistlethwaite, who used to be the head librarian at the Graduate Center, and now I think is at CUNY Central, that we did, called Being a Scholar in the Digital Era. And part of what we looked at in that work was the way that knowledge production works within academia, and sort of how digital knowledge production is changing the way that we do our jobs as academics. So one of the things we talked about in Being a Scholar in the Digital Era was the way that publishing is controlled by cartels, like Wiley and Elsevier and all the others. And we really raised the question about what is the benefit that those, very profitable publishing houses offer us when we are offering them our free labor. So we really were critical of the kind of traditional academic publishing and how it extracts labor from us as academics. In a following book called Going Public with Arlene Stein, who's at Rutgers, we talked about sort of the nuts and bolts of how you get your research, which is really designed for a small audience of peers and other scholars, and often written in a very particular kind of disciplinary language. How do you get that kind of work out into a broader public, to a wider audience who may not be well-versed in that sort of specialist language? And so we had some nuts and bolts advice in that book, which is really meant to be a kind of how-to manual. And one of the chapters in that book talked about the risk of going public and sort of the downsides for academics. And I think that this particular moment is a really challenging one to talk about being a public scholar, as we've seen from the recent and ongoing attacks against our faculty colleagues. I was just reading a story about a professor at Rutgers, Professor Bray, who's in history and is actually being forced to leave the country because of some of what he's written about. In a way, part of what I've argued in both these books is that there is often a kind of impulse among academics to retreat from this pull to being public, to say, oh no, I don't want any part of that. Sometimes it's about the politics of the moment and sort of a fear of being seen more publicly with around our work. But a lot of times it's just kind of the way that we're trained as academics to think of just talking to our peers and not to a broader public. But part of what I've argued is that the fact that we've made this digital turn, that our work is now so easily discoverable online, that it has really shifted the foundations of what we do as academics. So I've said many times and in different contexts that we are all digital scholars now. If you think about the library, when was the last time you went into the brick and mortar library? But more likely you have accessed the online library of Hunter College, within the last 24 hours, and you've done that from the convenience of your own home or office, right? That is what I mean by we're all digital scholars now. And the fact that we have made this move into the digital means that we are also all public scholars now, because the work that we produce engages with discourse that's available online digitally, and also the work that we create gets distributed digitally, and so it circulates to a much wider audience than just in peer-reviewed hidebound journals, as it might have done in a previous century. Okay, so that's kind of the big picture of where we are in terms of thinking about how we engage with broader publics. At an earlier time, say 2007, we might be talking about writing blogs or blog posts, and those come and go. I think those kind of long form written formats are still valuable. But now I think podcasting is becoming so popular for a lot of different reasons. There's one thing that's happened is that there was about, I don't know, 2 years, 18 months ago, there was a huge uptick in writing about podcasts, or sort of coverage of podcasts, because there was a big influx of cash from people who thought they could make a profit from podcasting. But I think that and that's sort of fallen off now, and people are getting laid off from podcasting. But I think that sort of gold rush into podcasting sort of indicates a different kind of trend that's happening. It's a small part of a larger trend. And I think that the larger trend that's happening with podcasting is that we are moving into a kind of different relationship to storytelling, which I think is actually a positive change. I think there are a lot of things about podcasting that are really innovative and generative and hopeful. One of them, I think, is that podcasting, the storytelling in podcasting, is more embodied than the written form. And what do I mean by that? Well, this summer I had the great joy to go to a sound design camp, and they talked about how sound affects your body and how we can elicit emotions based on sound design, right? So you know this kind of intuitively when you go see a movie and the music sort of swells and you get choked up, right? That's what I mean by sound design. There's a way in which sound can help us tell stories and reach people in a way that we might not be able to with just the written word. I think that podcasting also connects us to these really wonderful traditions, often in communities of color, in queer communities, a connection to oral history and to oral traditions, which sometimes is difficult to capture in the written word. And I think we also have a big trend happening for lots of different reasons, where people are moving perhaps away from the written and more toward the oral in their embrace of literacy. So people are more interested in hearing stories, hearing them rather than reading them, I think, in many ways. So that's kind of the big picture of how I got interested in podcasting, and part of the way that I use it in my classes. One thing that I'll say is that so I teach a lot of courses on whiteness and white supremacy, and there is a podcast by some people at Duke University. The series is called Scene, SCENE, on radio. It's a little bit of a play on words. And the season, I believe it's season 2 that they did on seeing whiteness, is just a wonderful primer for my students. And so I always assign it to them to listen to before class. And so when they're doing their final projects, a lot of time they will connect the stories that they heard in that podcast series to the readings that they're doing in class. And I'll bring in those examples. And the other thing I just want to say about Seen on Radio in terms of podcasting in the classroom is that series for me is completely aspirational, because each season and each episode, it's like they're building a curriculum. So they had an early one on, can't remember the first season, but they had one on men and masculinity. And then they did whiteness. I think the most recent season is on capitalism. And they had a whole series, one season on repair, kind of the idea of reparations and how do we get there. And they had one on climate justice as well. So there's a real way in which they are using, the people at Seen on Radio, it's John Biewen and collaborators, are using podcasting to really create a whole curriculum that I think is just a incredible resource for using in the classroom. So all of that is the big context for this. And based on that, I lobbied President Cantor to set aside a small bit of office space here on the 16th floor in the West Building that we could designate as a podcast studio, because we know from lots of research that students learn best when they create. Right. So it's not just let me talk at you and tell you how good podcasting is, or let me assign this podcast to you, although valuable, but where the real important and life-changing learning goes on is when people create their own podcasts, or students create their own podcasts. So once we got the space, I enlisted the help of my wonderful colleague, Justin, from ICIT, who has a background in podcasting, to teach a small class in our master's and BA/MS program. And he taught that last spring. So I'm going to turn it over to Justin, and he's going to talk about the studio and the digital content creation course that he taught for us. So, thanks.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jessie. I'm Justin. It's really great to see you all. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm so happy you all are here to learn more about podcasting. My name is Justin Tricarico. I'm an instructional designer and media specialist in the newly renamed Center for Digital Learning and Innovative Pedagogy. Before I worked at Hunter, I've been here for about 2 years now. And before I worked at Hunter, I was at Queens College for almost 14 years, doing some similar instructional technology related work. I've also worked as a freelance audio engineer for a lot of years in the past. So one of the things I worked on at Queens was designing podcast studio for the media studies program for their podcasting courses. So when I met Jessie and she wanted to set up the studio here, it was a very exciting thing for me. So I'm very glad that we were able to do it. Yeah, so that's my background. In addition to that, I taught a course in music recording at Queens for about 6 years, 6 of the 14 years I was there. Yeah, so thanks to Jessie, I had the opportunity to teach this digital content creation course in the spring. And let me go ahead and can share my screen and show you a little bit about what it's about. There we go. And yeah, so the course was structured so that students would have, there's basically, let me see if I can cue up the syllabus for you. It was structured to basically have 5 main units. The first unit was for creating, oh, whoops. Actually, give me one. Oh, there we go. Good. We got it. Yeah, the first unit was focused on podcasting. So we went over how, the technical basics of podcasting, how podcasts are structured. The students recorded scaffolded assignments that led up to them recording their own full podcast, which was a big chunk of their grade, part of their final project for the class. The second unit focused on recording short form video content. So think like reels on Instagram and things like that. So I showed them the basics of video editing, how to capture video on their phones, which culminated in creating videos for a social media campaign for their podcast that they've created for the class. And then the final unit of the class focused on creating content for social media. So the students learned some basic graphic design, how to develop a social media campaign. And then this all culminated in the sort of second half of their final project, which resulted in a week-long kickoff campaign for their for the podcast that they created for the class. So it was really it was really a good success. I felt like the students really took well to it, and it was really exciting to see students who were so used to expressing themselves through writing to learn this new medium to to express themselves through podcasting and other forms of multimedia. So I'd like to share a brief presentation going over some reasons for why we should consider podcasting, why we should consider incorporating podcasting into our curriculums, and an example. This was one of the first projects I worked on when I started here at Hunter with Ana Lucia Tello in the Romance Languages department for a project that we worked on together for her course. So I'm assuming we all are familiar with podcasts. In case anyone isn't, podcasts are relatively short form, usually spoken word audio programs that you can, originally before smartphones, you could download them to your iPod and things like that in your computer. But of course, now you can access them from a smartphone. So it's a form of multimedia that I think most Americans are familiar with, and it's all sort of the origins of it are all from radio. Spoken word content existed on the radio for almost 100 years now. So basically built on that idea, but delivering it a slightly different way and sort of democratizing it in a way that not everyone can have their own radio show, but pretty much everybody can have a podcast. So why should we assign students to create a podcast? So I think we can all agree that most independent assessment in students' lives has been focused on writing, writing essays, writing short written responses. When we ask students to create something, a lot of times it's something that's written. But of course, as we all understand, written communication is only one dimension of communication skills that students need to know to succeed. We all have to express ourselves clearly through the spoken word, as I hope I'm doing now as I talk through this presentation. When we present, when we interview for jobs, when we present papers at conferences, when we deliver reports on things we've worked on to other people. So just like being able to communicate clearly through writing, communicating clearly through speaking is arguably just as important. So creating a podcast gives students the opportunity to practice that in a way where they can really think through how they're going to express their ideas through the spoken word as opposed to the written word. And it's really interesting, and I found this too when I was teaching, that it's very much a different approach to writing when you're writing for the spoken word as opposed to writing for writing an essay. So it was interesting to see students develop that distinction when they were creating content for their podcasts. And luckily, because podcasting is a very popular and trendy thing right now, there's plenty of online resources to help both your students and you learn how to create podcasts. So if we want to think about an example, instead of writing a paper, you can assign your students to create a podcast about a specific topic or something you're discussing in your course. So, instead of giving them a writing prompt, you can give them a prompt to create audio content. A good thing to keep in mind that 250 words or about a page of written text is equal to roughly 2 minutes of spoken audio. So that's a good way to gauge. If you're used to assigning papers or essays, if you think about the number of words or the length that you're looking for, that can kind of help you. That can help you determine what would be the appropriate length for a podcast. A podcast of that depth, and students can choose the tool that they want to use based on their skill level. For my course, because my course was really focused on content creation, my students use Pro Tools, which is the industry standard, or I mean, now it for many years it was the industry standard. Now it's an industry standard for both audio production, for spoken audio production, and for music. Of course, there's other options as well. In the intermediate level, Soundtrap, which is really widely used in K through 12 schools, works really, really well for recording podcasts. And that's the tool, I'll be talking about that in a minute, that we use for Anna's course. It's sort of a light version of Pro Tools, where it allows you to record content and collaborate with other students in the class. So especially if you want to assign creating a podcast as a group project, Soundtrap is a really amazing tool for that. And there is an institutional license that you can buy, but the free version is pretty robust as it is, and that's what we use for Anna's course. The students just use the free version. And on the beginner level, we have Adobe Podcast. Adobe Podcast is really, really cool in the sense, and it's a really great sort of introduction to podcasting for students, because it actually allows you to edit a podcast like you would edit a written document, like an essay. You can remove it. Basically, when you record, it transcribes your speech into text that you can delete and rearrange like you would in a Word document. So it's really, really very cool. So especially if it's students' very first time out trying out creating a podcast, Adobe Podcast is another great tool for that purpose, and it's also free. All three of these tools are free. The Pro Tools has a paid professional version, but the free version is what I used for my course. And here's a sample rubric for assessing podcast assignments. For a written document, or like an essay or a paper, most of the rubric is going to be focused on content. So how it's formed, your citations, things like that. The other consideration, and of course, there's content is an item on this rubric, but other things to be concerned with are the format, formatting, having an introduction, introducing yourself, having a clear structure in a way that makes sense for a podcast, delivering the content confidently, and the technical side, recording audio clearly, making sure that all the elements can be heard in proper balance with each other, and so on. So this is the project for Ana Lucia Teo's course. The course is Spanish 208, Spanish for heritage speakers. So basically, to give you some background, this is an advanced Spanish course, primarily directed towards students who grew up speaking Spanish at home.
Justin,
Yes.
sorry, but your slide is like it. There we go. Oh, no, it went back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it not showing up properly?
It's hard to see the whole slide. Is it just me?
Yeah. Does anyone else having trouble seeing it? Looks okay to me. Gina, does it look okay to you?
Just a little center.
It's automatically zooming in.
Yeah,
Ah,
that's what it is.
Oh, really? Oh no, I hate that. How do I make it stop doing that?
So sorry to interrupt your
No,
flow.
that's okay. Wow, that's really odd. Let me try sharing again. Sorry. Thank you for highlighting that.
No problem. I just want to make sure everyone can see what you've got there because these are great resources. That looks
Okay.
good.
Good, good. If it does
Thank
it again,
you.
let me know. So for Spanish 208, Spanish for Heritage Speakers, like I said, this course is targeted towards students who grew up speaking Spanish at home. So most of them grew up speaking Spanish. It's basically a course for them to refine their language skills and speaking Spanish. So these are students who are speaking Spanish generally on a very advanced level. So the final project for this class, Anna was previously having the students give a final exam or take a final exam. She wanted to give them the opportunity to create a podcast instead of taking this final exam. And the podcast that she used as the inspiration for this assignment was Radio Ambulante. It's a Spanish language podcast on NPR that talks about the Spanish language experience in the U.S. So she was already using this podcast, listening to the podcast as material for the students to listen to, write about, comment on, and to talk about in class. So she basically wanted the students to build or create a podcast sort of in the mold of that or similar to that, but focused on the Spanish speaking experience in New York City. When she had this idea, she reached out to me through Julie Van Petegem, the previous director of ACERT, her colleague in Romance languages, and we worked together to come up with a solution for students to be able to do this. But this again was all her. I want to make sure to give her credit because this is based on a lightning talk. Oh yeah, we'll talk about lightning talks at the end. But this is based on a lightning talk for ACERT that Anna and I did together. And you can see some of her goals for the project: recognizing communities as sites of knowledge making and contributing to an alternative narrative of the city. So this is how Anna scaffolded up to the students doing this final project. There's 3 assignments that were required. The first was the proposal, where students had to basically do a story pitch, like pitch the idea of what they want their podcast to be about. So in 400 words, they're going to present the story, reflect on its significance, who's the protagonist, the plot, goals and obstacles, when and where, and why is the story important to you, and how does it connect to your interests. So each group, and this was built in groups of 3 to 4 students, would present this proposal as the first part of the assignment. The next part was the script, where they would have to write a script, or at least an outline of how the podcast was going to flow and what was going to be in it. Anna encouraged the students to interview somebody as part of the podcast. It wasn't a hard and fast requirement, but most students either interviewed somebody or focused on or approached it from a historical standpoint, where they incorporated either a live interview that they conducted or basically file or archival interview footage or interview tape of people speaking. And she also took care to go over consent. So if there was a consent form that students were given to give to their subjects for the interview, to make sure that they consented to have their content recorded and shared with the class. So after the script part of the assignment was due, Anna scheduled 2 training sessions with me or one of my colleagues. Actually, Logan here handled it when I was on parental leave, and this would have been this past fall. But basically, I or Logan would present a class session on using Soundtrap, how to record, how to add audio from YouTube, and how to collaborate with classmates. So we do this initial training session in the Chain and Language Center lab. And then, let's say about 4 weeks later, students would come back to the lab for a class meeting. We'd go over some more advanced techniques and see if, kind of get sort of a status check on how the students were doing with the project from a technical perspective. So this is an overview of the technology tools that we used for the project. So the first, as I've been talking about, is Soundtrap. It's a free cloud-based digital audio workstation. It allows students to, whoops. My playback came out of nowhere there. Soundtrap is like I said, it's a free software. It's a web-based platform that allows the students to record audio, build their projects, and collaborate with each other in real time. So it's really, really quite cool. The students log into it. Multiple students can be logged in and working in the same project at the same time. So the students don't have to download any software to their computer. They don't have to worry about shuffling files back and forth with each other. Soundtrap sort of handles all that seamlessly for them in the background. So all they have to do is basically record and then drag and drop the content they want into Soundtrap. The next tool is Zoom. So Zoom is actually, in addition to being a video conferencing platform with which I assume we're all familiar, is also a really great tool for recording remote interviews. With the sort of institutional Zoom license that we have at CUNY, Zoom allows you to record meetings with an audio file for each participant. So this is really important for recording interviews for podcasts. Yeah, good thing. I have some audio samples to play for you that are playing spontaneously. But luckily, I'm not sharing my sound, so we're the only ones who can hear it. Jessie's here with me as well. Forgive me. So Zoom is a really, really great tool for recording remote interviews, and it's something that every student and staff and faculty member at CUNY has access to. So one of the things we went over in that session in the computer lab was how to use Zoom to record interviews. So the students logged in, configured their Zoom account to make sure that they could record the audio in isolation. So one track for each participant, and then later on they can pull those audio files and drop them into Soundtrap for editing. So it makes it, when you have the separate audio files for each participant, makes it very easy to manipulate and edit the material as you need. The next tool is this website, cobalt.tools. It's this amazing website. Unfortunately, I don't think it works for YouTube anymore, but it's a really great tool for pulling audio from video streaming sites. So a lot of the students wanted to incorporate audio clips from news reports or historical documentaries, things like that on YouTube. Cobalt.tools was a really handy way for them to pull the content from YouTube and incorporate it into their Soundtrap project. For the next term that Anna's offering this class and doing this project, I have to come up with a new one because the last time I tried it, Cobalt.tools didn't support YouTube anymore. But for other sites, it works really well. And the final tool is Padlet. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar. The students posted all their final podcasts onto a Padlet to share with each other. It's a very easy platform for them to do that. You can upload an audio file and have basically a gallery at the end of the semester of every student's work. So I'd like to take a break from talking about the amazing student work that Anna's students did and give you the opportunity to listen to it. So actually, if you can just give me a moment, I'm going to reshare, including my audio. And let's see. Okay. 1 second. Okay, great. So I'm actually I'm just sharing my sound, so you can hear these two examples. So let me go ahead and play the first one. And please let me know if you don't hear any sound in maybe 10 or 15 seconds. Let me know that you don't hear it and I'll troubleshoot.
For Nydia Velasquez, who just declared victory in both English and Spanish and joins us now with her family, with her friends and supporters. First of all, tell us how it feels to be making history here tonight.
Well, I am very honored. I'm very thrilled. I am very proud that the residents of the 12th Congressional District gave me the honor of becoming the first Puerto Rican woman to serve in the House of Representatives.
Estás escuchando un reportaje de 1992 sobre la elección de Nydia Velázquez, la primera mujer puertorriqueña en ser electa al Congreso de los Estados Unidos. En esta breve entrevista, Nidia habla sobre sus aspiraciones para su comunidad, como mejorar los sistemas de salud, el desarrollo económico y el acceso a la educación de calidad. Estos tres temas en particular son personales para Nidia Velázquez, ya que ella creció en circunstancias humildes en un pueblo de campos de azúcar en Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so that's a sample of one of Anna's students' podcasts. Again, this is something that the students are using. They're using all free tools, and as far as I could tell, no actual professional equipment. They recorded their speech using computer headsets, their phones. So, like I said, it's really quite amazing what the students can do, even without a lot of technical resources. I'd like to play one other example from this course, and if time permits, I'd like to play one example from my class, and then I'd like to give you all a brief tour of the studio, since Jessie and I are here at the studio right now. So here's the second sample from Anna's course.
Bienvenidos de vuelta a Voces Latinoamericanas. Primero escucharemos a Ruby Sánchez, quien fue entrevistada por Tomás, y ella es parte de la generación Z. También una estudiante aquí en Hunter. Aquí ellos.
Hola, soy Tomás Jiménez. Muchas gracias por ayudarnos con nuestro proyecto. ¿Nos puedes dar una introducción sobre ti? ¿Cómo te llamas? ¿Cuántos años tienes? ¿Y cómo aprendiste el español?
Hola, claro, y muchas gracias por tenerme. Estoy muy emocionada para dar mi opinión sobre los temas de este podcast. Me llamo Ruby, soy mexicana, pero
Yeah, so that's another example. And the final example I'd like to play for you is an example from my course. So this is one of the final projects from one of my students. This is so basically the final project prompt for the course required the students to create a podcast series focused on a topic of interest in sociology. And basically create the first episode of that series. So this the series, or the concept that the student came up with, was a podcast focused on how technology impacts immigration and immigration enforcement in the U.S. And this first episode focused on how databases and sort of big data impact that how immigration is managed and enforced in the U.S. And she did just an amazing job. Like it was like if you've ever had a student who just understood what they were supposed to do for an assignment, 110%, this was that student. So I'm very, very happy to share with you just a brief snippet of her 26-minute or so final project for my course.
We are living in a digital world where the minor inconveniences we face in our daily routine can be solved with a simple click, tap, or swipe away on an app. Then an app to track when that next train is coming, an app to schedule your next doctor appointment, and an app that was once used to make appointments for asylum seekers will now be used as a tool for deportation. Where did that information come from? What are the implications for the undocumented people currently living in the U.S.? I'm Nayeli Rodriguez, your host for Investigation to Digital Borders, guiding you through the current usage of online databases in U.S. immigration. Let's investigate.
So that's the introduction that one of my students created for their podcast. So, and this group was all students who had no experience creating audio content previously. So again, it's something I'm really very quite proud of that they were able to do that, and for some of them to take so well to it. So now that I'm finished my presentation, I just want to show you guys briefly, as Jessie mentioned, and for those of you who showed up a little late, the podcast studio is here in Hunter West, room 1638. On the floor where sociology and urban planning are. So let me give you just a look. I think that's the one. Yeah, there we are. That's Jessie and I. Jessie came by from her office to come pay a visit. So you can see we have a computer. This device here to my left is the Rodecaster Pro. It's a self-contained audio recorder that was specifically selected for this purpose because it is so intuitive and easy to use. Like basically with very minimal training, someone can just turn it on and hit this big round button that says record and record themselves with maybe a few minute tutorial. And then we're set up in the studio to record with 4 microphones. So Jessie and I are seated at microphones 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4. There's 3 and 4. Make it over to 4. There we go. There's 4. Yeah. So the room it's a pretty standard windowless faculty office in Hunter West, but it serves the purposes for now. The studio is not completely done yet. It'd be really great to have some acoustic treatment, and maybe have. Equipment-wise, we're actually doing mostly okay, but a little bit of acoustic treatment would help. The sound quality be a little bit better. And in addition to the audio aspect of it, the audio aspect of it is the sort of well built out aspect of it. The video aspect of it is still a work in progress. The audio equipment was all purchased specifically for the studio. The video equipment is all stuff that I sort of found and negotiated for on campus, so it's all kind of old, and none of it is exactly perfect for our purposes, but it mostly gets the job done. But we have this camera here that allows us to record a shot of 2 participants at once, or if you have 3 people, you can have a tight shot of each individual person, and then we have cameras for the second position, and there's a remote that I can use to manipulate the cameras. So I can zoom in and move the image, and then a camera for the person using microphone number 1, which is me in this instance, and the person who's seated at the Rodecaster to start and stop the recording and control the levels in the headphones for everyone else. So all of my students most of my students recorded their podcasts in this studio. So for one of my classes, my students actually came and recorded in the studio for the first time, got a sense of how the equipment all worked, and then they either conducted their interviews one-on-one, in a similar configuration to how Jessie and I are seated now, or they conducted their interviews over Zoom. But all of them, they were kind of required as part of the class to record their interview with professional equipment. So they either used the equipment here, or they used professional quality microphones that they borrowed and used at home. So that's about it. It's to use the studio. You just have to, for the time we're refining the booking process, but the most I'll ask Christina to share this. You can book a meeting with me, and I can give you a sort of a technical, like a brief, like the sort of training session that you would need to use the equipment, and then you'll be able to book the studio using a web page. So if any of you have booked ed tech consultations with me or my colleagues, or the teaching consultations with Christina and Gina, it'll be very similar to that.
Yeah, I just will chime in and say that when I lobbied President Cantor for the space and the equipment, the ask was that we get all this so that it could be used across the arts and sciences. So it's not just for sociology, it's not just for our program, it's for all of arts and sciences. So, and Justin has been super helpful and really wonderfully available. And so I highly recommend reaching out to him for help with the technical stuff. And if you have questions about the teaching side, or sort of, big picture stuff, I'm also happy to help with that. So.
Yeah, and of course, and forgive me, I forgot to mention that if you want to talk about incorporating podcasts in your class, then you should also schedule a meeting with me for that. That was how I connected with Anna, how I connected with Jessie, and I enjoy a lot of aspects of my job, but helping faculty develop multimedia assignments and giving students the opportunity to express themselves and through multimedia in ways that they may not be familiar with is one of my favorite parts of my job. So I'm always happy to discuss that with faculty. But yeah, so right now I guess we'd love to take any questions or anything else. I can take a look at the chat. I see there's a lot of activity there, and I haven't looked at it in a while. So while I'm looking at that, if anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear them.
I added some resources to the chat, so
Oh,
I
okay.
assume somebody will cull those and put them into a document.